What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Week 3 DFS MVP podcast. I'm your host, TJ Hernandez, the director of DFS at 4for4.com. As always, with my regular co-hosts, Mr. John Daigle and Pat Corain. Boys, how was your Week 2?
DFS was not great, but good Week 2 overall.
Feel like we got quite a few people on the correct plays last week. I did not parse it together correctly personally because I had a lot of Jamar Chase more than anything, which took up a lot of salary, but everything made sense. We talk about paying down at quarterback, and Brock Purdy ended up winning the SPY and the $50 red zone. A 4for4 subscriber won with the Brock Purdy stack, the red zone. And then the Millie Maker was Geno Smith, paid down for that. So overall, I think we were on the right spots, hoping to get it right again this week.
Yeah, the 4for4 Discord had a massive week. If you've been paying attention to Twitter, our cash game lineups have been crushing it. I mean, we're probably not going to run, we're definitely not going to run this hot all season, but 86 percentile lineup week 1, 96 percentile week 2. And then we did have a couple of takedowns in the Discord. As always, the subscribers do better than the analysts, but that's what we're here for. If you haven't got in that Discord yet, you can click on the link in the description below. Use the promo code YouTube to save 25% off 4for4 subscription at 4for4.com/plans. And just a reminder, if you haven't upgraded your DFS subscription yet, we've partnered with the Solver, the best optimizer in the game, so you could upgrade the plan to that, get fully projections fully synced to the Solver automatically as long as you're a 4for4 sub. And as always with Mr. Corain, one of the biggest pieces of content that we're paying attention to each week is his week 3 walkthrough at his website, legendaryupside.com. Jordan Addison was a cover boy for that this week. Before we get into the analysis this week, Corain, any big highlights from the walkthrough that you want to touch on?
I think we'll get to Addison for sure, because that's kind of the game of the week. I did kind of want to name it after Tyreek Hill, because I think this is just such a massive spot, and it was a little bit of a layup for me. But I felt like needed to take a bigger swing and go with Addison. But I think there's some really interesting guys in the late games as well. We'll talk about that have quite high ceilings. I always name it after someone in the 1 o'clock window, but there's some really high upside guys in the later window, I think.
Yeah, we have a pretty unique slate this week. Massive chalk on one game. We only have 3 games in the late slate and 9 in the early slate. As always, the NFL just butchering that opportunity to have even split and better slate in the afternoon. But also we have some weather this week. Early in the week, it was a hurricane watch. Doesn't look like there's going to be any true hurricane hitting the coast. But we do have 8 games with potential rain, 5 games with wind gusts over 10 miles per hour. So just both of you, kind of a general question, because on these weeks, it seems like no matter what we say, no matter how many times we say we're looking at the projections, the number one question we get from subs or just on Twitter is like, what about the weather? What about the rain? I'll start with you, Daigle. Like, how do you typically handle weather, especially when it's like last minute things?
I genuinely wait until Sunday morning to make my decision. I reached out even after hearing about the hurricane, which is expected to affect the Colts-Ravens game and Washington Bills the most. I immediately reached out to our good friend Chris Allen over at Fantasy Life and asked him to look into it. And so far, it doesn't seem like it's expected to impact by game time. Again, 48 hours to go. And so I usually just wait and see what ownership by kickoff is going to do with all of it, especially because Ravens Colts could be fun. That could be an overlooked spot, even skinny stacks, since those are 2 teams we're attacking through the air. So I'll wait until Sunday morning and just stick around in the Discord, and we'll probably have an answer for you by the time we jump on for our chat at 11 a.m. Eastern.
Corain, I mean, I typically am of the school of thought that, like, if you have any good projection model, if you're looking at Vegas numbers, if those numbers aren't moving or are moving, like, all of that stuff is accounted for already, right? So if the point total isn't moving, like, Vegas isn't ignoring these things. Like, I'm looking at projections, I'm looking at totals, and if they don't move, it is what it is. I'll take the risk. How do you usually play these spots?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think from what I understand, and most of my knowledge on this comes from listening to Chris Allen. I think he's done an amazing job.
Shut up.
Stuff. And but I do think there's like maybe a little bit higher chances that the game can outright fail if it's like pretty bad weather. But I don't know that we're to any of like nothing this week strikes me as something where we need to even start getting worried about that.
Yeah.
But that would be if I saw the total coming down and I knew it was going to be a popular game, or it was a game I was really wanting to play before the weather stuff, then I would probably just have in the back of my mind that there's a chance that like the average outcome that we're all trying to account for, there's some more tail end downside outcomes that could really
exactly
this thing. And that's maybe something to keep in mind when it gets colder. But this week it seems, nothing crazy.
Yeah, we've done lots of studies. Like, unless it's a torrential downpour or winds are like steady between 15 and 20 miles per hour higher, like for the most part, things aren't affected too big. You could go to 4for4 and look at some of the old studies from Chris Allen with some evergreen content that holds up. I mean, kind of a cop out is like, if it's a tiebreaker, if you have projections and you're worried about like a floor in cash games or something in GPPs, I mean, if people are really overweighting this stuff still, and we're going to get crazy low ownership on a guy that's still projecting really well in the weather, probably an opportunity for us in GPPs. But just wanted to get your guys' quick thoughts there because so many games could be affected, or at least the perception is that they'll be affected this week. But let's get right into it, starting with the potential shootouts and then getting to teams with the high totals. I mean, really, we have so many games with big spreads this week that we really only have one game that's standing out as a shootout. The rest of these games, we're kind of hoping these other teams will keep pace to turn it into something where the teams we like will keep their foot on the gas. But the big one, early game, Vikings versus Chargers, 54-point total. The spread is only 1 in that game. We're getting massive chalk everywhere. Pat, I'll start with you on the Vikings side. As we mentioned, Addison was your cover boy this week. Chargers allowing the second most fantasy points to quarterbacks and the most points to wide receivers. We know everybody's going to be on Jefferson. Cousins is going to be the chalk. Do you have any preference on how to get unique here? We've kind of maybe given it away a little bit, but Chargers are super vulnerable against the deep ball through 2 weeks.
Yeah, I don't know that you're going to be able to get unique. I think you can kind of like, how much chalk do you want to eat here? And you're probably like the plays that are like, less popular probably still be pretty popular.
Yeah.
I thought maybe after Joshua Kelly burned everyone that he would be an interesting angle off of this. And then I could do like a little mini with him and Jordan Addison. That was kind of where my head went first. And that seems like it's going to be plenty well owned. So I don't know about that. I will just say, with the reason I'm excited about Addison in particular, I mean, obviously Justin Jefferson is an absolute smash in this spot, but the Chargers are allowing 15+ yard passes on 26% of their dropbacks. That's the highest rate in the NFL. Part of that's because they've played Miami. They let up 17 explosive passes in week 1. So that is part of it. But I do think this is a really good matchup for the Vikings and Jordan Addison in particular, who has an 8 out of 16.5, which is just absurd. He is getting targeted deep downfield. And the interesting thing about him is that he's not seeing a lot of double coverage. He's been double covered at just a 30th percentile for wide receivers, which makes sense. Like, you can't really count for him because you also have to deal with Justin Jefferson, and TJ Hawkinson is drawing a lot of underneath coverage. So you get this first round rookie who's going to, I think, see a lot of like singled up coverage and attacking deep, where this defense is the weakest. Highest total game of the week. I do really want to have some Addison. It's not going to be contrarian, though. I think maybe it won't be super, super popular, but I think it's going to be kind of like maybe it comes in 15 or something, and you kind of deal with that.
Yeah, right now we have at 4for4, we have Addison, Osborne, and Hawkinson all projecting for single-digit ownership. I think at least one of those guys gets steamed on Sunday. I mean, that's also just kind of like the math of it. It's just always, it's going to be hard to project 5 guys on the same team for 12 to 15%. It just doesn't shake out that way. But I think one of those guys does get stained. But I mean, if it was clean cut, if we had Addison running 90% of the routes and getting a 15% target share, he wouldn't even have a chance to be underowned, right? He would just be 15-20% like everyone else. So like we kind of want that like dirty projection in this spot. So I do think there's a chance, as if Hawk is the one that gets the steam, that Addison, even if Addison comes at 9%, that could take the stank off of the big ownership if you stack this game. Daigle on the other side. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to say, for DFS purposes, one of the reasons I do like him is that he isn't running all the routes. He only has 72% route participation, which is pretty low for wide receiver we'd be really excited about. But I think, one, KJ Osborne is not really doing anything ahead of him. I think he could see a bit of a playing time bump this week. Even if he doesn't, he's running enough routes to be usable because he's getting targeted at a high rate when on the field. So, and specifically getting targeted downfield. So I kind of like, from the DFS perspective, that it's a little bit of leap of faith on the routes, because hopefully that keeps ownership in check.
I mean, with all of these rookies, especially wide receivers, we need to get there before they hit, right? Once they hit, it's a wrap. So we need to be chasing it before it happens. Daigle, on the Chargers side, I don't think we have a chance to get unique, because their target share is so concentrated. They're the only team that doesn't have at least 3 players with a 10% target share. Everything's going to Allen and Williams. And then, as Corinne mentioned, Kelly probably just stays chalky because of this game. I mean, I'm not going to ask you how to get unique on this side. How do you think it's most likely to play out on the Charger side between those big 3?
I think it's going to be a similar game plan to week 1 rather than week 2 against the Titans. Week 1, of course, is when Eckler, Kelly had 16 carries each. Justin Herbert was schemed 5 scrambles, more of a run-heavy approach, as they ranked top 8 and run play rate on early downs in their first 3 quarters, which highlights their intent. We just saw how the Vikings play defense. Even as Brian Flores was getting punched in the mouth for 6 yards per carry, through 2 games, that defense has played man coverage in only 2 total snaps. They don't budge from what they do. They will blitz you, as they've done at the first and second highest rates in the leagues in their first 2 games, and they will play high safeties and allow you to run on them, which is what makes me high on Josh Kelly. And after Kelly ran a route on 66% of dropbacks, I just thought we were going to get bounce back, or we were going to get under-rostered Kelly for recency bias, who is clearly an every touch option in this game. But yes, we were all scouring the projections earlier, and right now it seems like we have Kelly 22+% rostered. And so it breaks my heart, because it is an amazing spot. I think that's how this game fails and doesn't go over as well, is through the running game. So I kind of want to play Kelly for all those reasons. But outside of that, I'm not exactly sure, especially as you mentioned, with all the rain involved, what I'm going to do just yet. Because I just explained how this game comes under, and this game fails. That wouldn't be surprising at all. But at the same time, we're also seeing, because of how Flores plays defense, that historically is catered to Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen last year against zone coverage, which, again, as we said, is all the Vikings are doing, 15th in yards per route run. He's 14th in yards per route run this year against zone coverage. He just doesn't miss a beat in that department. So those are my 2 favorite plays for the Chargers in this game. I just don't know yet how the hell I'm going to play it.
Yeah. One thing about this game, like, failing, is that it's still 6 games above the next game in terms of the total, 6 points higher than the next highest total. So he can kind of fail by a touchdown and still be really high.
Yeah, one thing to keep in mind in games like this, when everybody is chalk, that doesn't mean that a lot of lineups are playing all of these players together. So you could still get a unique combination with a lot of chalky players. Think back to that Seattle-Detroit game last year, mega chalk. It hit with like 6 players in the lineup, like 4 of them are 20% or something like that. So you can stack 4 20% players in this game, throw in a couple more for a mega onslaught. That's going to be a unique combination. You still need unique players elsewhere, but keep that in mind. That could still be a unique combination. As far as cash games go, we have Cousins as a top 2 value on FanDuel at 7,800, but probably cash game option on both sites. Jefferson is a top 2 wide receiver in terms of 4-for-4 value on both sites. He's currently in the FanDuel optimal. Mike Williams is a top 4 wide receiver value on DraftKings. He is in the DraftKings optimal right now, so keep that in mind for cash. Jumping to these high total big spread games. The next one up is the Dolphins, 6.5 point favorites, 27.25 team total, 48 point total on that game. Broncos defense has been pretty much abysmal so far this year. Daigle, we have a big question mark in this game with Jalen Waddle's health. He did get a limited practice in on Friday, so that means he could still get cleared on Saturday. So we're kind of waiting to see on that. If as of now, we have huge projections on Raheem Mostert and Tyreek Hill. Maybe Durham Smythe is chalky if Waddle is out. Regardless of how this plays out, we're going to have an interesting spot with Tua. He is basically the same price as Kirk Cousins, but he's about to get half of the ownership. Is this a legit pivot off of that Chargers Vikings game?
I do think this environment is absolutely a legit pivot. You ask about what happens if the Chargers Vikings come under, which games can go over. And I think there are 2 games I'm eyeing right now that I have a lot of interest in. And one is stacking this game across the board, because at least the early results are the Broncos giving signals to be constant over games. Denver's offense has scored a touchdown on their possessions at the 5th highest rate in the league so far. So, and this includes that Hail Mary, of course, but they haven't been the issue so far. As you mentioned, TJ, it's been their defense, a defense that's creating pressure at only the 29th rate in the league right now, even though they blitz at the 7th highest rate. We just saw the Commanders come off 35 points with ease, and the Raiders are top 7 in touchdowns on their possessions in week 1. So I do think both sides will have success here, which gives us the right formula to target. And what makes it more strategic, fun, and complicated is that even I don't know how to stuck Russell Wilson. I think cash games, you're the one figuring out the pools right now. I think cash games and maybe even tournaments will come down to playing Tyreek Hill and Justin Jefferson. How do you do that? Because that's the theme of the slate. The 2 most important players in this game that arguably can't fail even as wide receivers. And so to do that, I start thinking about spinning down at quarterback. I start thinking about some 3K wide receivers. And I, unfortunately, like a lot of 3K wide receivers we'll talk about later. But Russell Wilson, it's just hard because I do not know where to stack him here. Javonte Williams would be interesting given that his rate of backfield touches increased last week up to 74% from week 1. He's also now going back to the preseason. He's been targeted on 42% of his routes. The issue is he is very clearly not recovered because he has 0 juice right now, 3.7 yards per touch. Not only that, but Sean Payton gave Jaleel McLaughlin 1 touch last week, and it was the Broncos' only backfield touch inside the 10-yard line, the most important part for fantasy. So he can't trust Pirine or Javonte inside the 10-yard line either. So that kind of takes me away from that. And then Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton, just in the context of the slate, aren't value salary-wise. They're pretty tough to get to, priced in that mid 6K tier. So I think about it, and I'm like, I guess Adam Troutman's right here. His only target was inside the 10-yard line, and he only earned 1 target, but I guess he was at least out there with no other tight end being involved in the passing game. So it's just tough, but I do think Russell Wilson is a value that I don't know how to get to and stack around just yet.
Yeah, my guess would be that if when it comes down to it, there's just so many good quarterbacks on the slate that we're probably giving up a little too much projection with Russell Wilson, even if we get the ownership discount, especially with us getting ownership discount on Tua.
So,
but go ahead.
My lone argument against that is that football is not good right now. Everyone's knocking the rust off. If we were going to go down at quarterback, I genuinely think the first month of the season is the time to do that, since even Desmond Ridder was the QB 12 last week because he got pushed into 10 carries. Why can't I? And again, we talked about Geno and Brock Purdy being pay down options last week. Why can't that happen again with a 5,900 Russ, with a 5K Desmond Ridder? I could definitely see those situations happening this early in the year.
I mean, that's super fair. And Corinne, I mean, talk us through a little bit more on that side. We saw Mims pop in limited time last week. It's such a small snap share that, like, I don't know if we could take the leap yet. And the only thing I would say about this, like, unconcentrated target share is they just are starting to get healthy, right? Jerry Jeudy just played last week. Like, do we start to see this thing concentrate at least a little bit compared to what we saw the first 2 weeks?
Yeah, I think when you look at Cortland Sutton versus Jerry Jeudy, I go, okay, Jeudy could be interesting because they're kind of like their profile through 2 weeks looks pretty similar. And Judy's coming off a serious injury and Sutton's just out there. So I'm like, there's a chance that Judy's kind of going to pass Sutton as soon as he gets back to full health. And that's obviously what we thought would happen before the season. And so you can kind of take a little bit of a leap of faith there. But I agree with Daigle. Like the way these salaries are coming in does not make me want to play Judy. It's just sort of going to be tough to fit. And then I do not like what the Broncos are doing with Marvin Mims because they're not putting him out there. He has a 20% route participation. I don't think we can mess with that. Like this is not high enough. So
he's ran 20 routes and he leads the Broncos in receiving yards. That's how good he is. He just needs more run. Yeah.
Yeah. And and I think they're probably bringing him along. Like he's a second round pick. They clearly believe in him, but it's like they're putting this on his plate. He's crushing that. It's like, all right, let's put a little more on your plate. Right. And probably by like week 8 or week 9, we're going to be like super psyched about Marvin Mims, but that's a while from now. So I don't think we're going there. And so I want to play Tyreek a lot. Like I think Tyreek could really crush whether or not Waddle goes. I think this Broncos defense is real bad. It's kind of, this is a defense we didn't expect to be like terrible, but they're kind of popping in a number of different ways as being very vulnerable against the pass in particular. They're 29th in EPA allowed per drop back. They're getting quick pressure. That's pressure in 2.5 seconds or less at the 30th highest rate. And then ESPN rolled out these player tracking metrics. You can check them out for free at ESPN Analytics. They use the player tracking metrics to see if guys are winning within 2.5 seconds. And their pass rush ranks 27th in that metric. So it's like they're not getting to the quarterback quickly. And for the player tracking data, that makes perfect sense because they're not winning quickly either. So I think like when you look at Tua and what could disrupt this passing attack, it is pressure. Right. And they probably get Armstead back this week. So, they're kind of like maybe a little bit tougher than they've been. And then they're going against this unit that's not going to be able to do much about what they're going to be doing on offense. So I think the Dolphins put up points with ease and probably through the air. It's just like, how do I attack this from a DFS perspective?
Yeah, going back to what Daigle said the last couple of weeks, like what should these guys be owned versus what are they owned? So even if Tyreek is like chalky or like the second highest owned wide receiver, this is probably a spot where he should be like 35% and he's going to come in at like 20%. And you could kind of say the same thing for Justin Jefferson, but you can tell yourself a cleaner story of like how Jefferson doesn't get through touchdowns. Like there's just more guys on his team that can score the touchdowns, where Tyreek, I mean, he could go 203 like pretty easily in this spot, especially if Durham Smythe is taking ownership away from him. Like what are we even talking about here? So I think if we get 19% Tyreek, I'm going to be pretty happy with that.
Oh yeah,
me too.
Yeah. From a cash game,
if Jalen Waddle's out, it probably increases, but even so, given the game environment, I think I really like Tyreek Hill better than Justin Jefferson if you're choosing one.
Yeah. Me too.
From a cash game standpoint, Tyreek and Jefferson are lapping the wide receiver field in projection and value score. The way salaries shake out, you're probably going to have to coin flip. It kind of comes down to how comfortable you are stacking in cash. If you assume like Cousins and Mike Williams are in your cash game lineup, it just depends if you're comfortable stacking that game with 3 players or if you prefer Tyreek. I still haven't decided on that. Raheem Mostert, 6,600 FanDuel, 6,000 DK is a top 3 running back value on both sites. He is currently in both optimals on the solver. Let's jump to the Jaguars game, a 9-point spread here, 26.75 team total for the Jaguars in a game with a 44.5 point total against the Texans. Pat, this looks like a bounce back spot for the Jags. Looked like they might get rolling a little bit in week 1, a complete dud versus the Chiefs with Chris Jones back. But this is a Houston secondary that's already struggled a bit, and now they're down Derek Stingley. This looks like a pretty good Calvin Ridley spot, especially with Travis Etienne probably being chalky. Like I like playing alpha wide receivers that are going to be underowned because other alphas are going to be super popular. But this is a blow up spot here for the Jags, I think. So how are you playing this, especially with Zay Jones possibly being out?
I think he is out, right? Or is he
ruled out?
He got officially ruled out. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. I don't know. This is going to be really interesting to see how the Jags deploy their personnel this week. Because when I was looking at the matchup, I thought they might be kind of back a little bit away from the heavy 3 wide receiver sets that they rolled out against the Chiefs and back to more 2 wide receiver sets, and we might see less Christian Kirk. But that was under the assumption that Zay Jones would be able to play. I'm not sure how they're going to do this. I'm kind of curious to see. But that really doesn't have an effect on Calvin Ridley, who will be out there all the time. And I agree. I think this is a really good spot for Ridley. We got, I think, like real information in week 1 that this guy is going to be a huge part of their offense. Then he does. And, it's like, okay, Kirk comes back to life and maybe this is going to be more spread out, but I'm willing to say, like, let's bet that it's back to Ridley. He kind of showed us, even through 2 weeks, I think what we want to see. He's got 25% targets per route run, which is really nice. He is playing basically all outside. So if they do kind of go more with a little bit of like a power look and try to establish ETN here, then Ridley could also benefit from that. So I like ETN in this spot, but if he's going to be chalky, I think in some ways that could help Ridley. I think there's like some outcomes where Christian Kirk doesn't play a ton on the outside and Ridley's, I'm not even sure who their 4th wide receiver is, but competing against, lower target competition because we aren't seeing 3 wide receiver sets quite as much, just based on how the Jaguars might want to attack here and kind of establish it a little bit more against an inferior opponent.
Yeah, they got like Jamal Agnew hybrid who they throw targets to, or it's just like Ingram or Ingram playing in the slot. Who actually Ingram's interesting because he's 3rd on the team in target share, 5th among tight ends in target share. We've already had 2 pass catchers pop. Like, maybe they spread it out, but I still like Ridley a lot here. Daigle, this spot's interesting because a couple weeks ago we would say, well, we probably don't have bringbacks on the Texans side. Now we have like 2 pretty damn good bringbacks. We got a high dot guy, Nico Collins, and then we got Tank Dell, who led the team in targets last week. So even if it is in garbage time, I kind of like the Texans wide receivers here. Houston's throwing it a little bit. You talked about it with Paulson yesterday. So how are you feeling about these pass catchers?
And like when I suggest someone redraft waiver wire column and then they're put into a different tier, it's like we're talking about 2 different things. Like Josh Reynolds was a great pickup and is a good play this week. We'll get to that game in a bit. But we don't need to put him in like tier 2 of wide receivers. He's not Nico Collins, right? That's kind of what's happening with Tank Dell right now. Is like he had a good game. Everyone saw him in the preseason, and now they're considering him next to Nico Collins. But you don't understand. Nico Collins is ascending and breaking out as we thought he may without Brandon Cooks. To be targeted on 25% of his routes, to have a team high target share with a 13.5-yard depth of target. So he's getting all these targets downfield as well with this 23.5% target share. That's the player we want. And more importantly for DFS, that's the player get lost. Because in DraftKings in particular, everyone wants to pay down. Everyone will see Tank Dell as the team leader in targets last week, whenever Nico Collins just right there in an uncomfortable spot at 5,300, when you could argue he should be a 6'5" receiver. So regardless of how you play the Jaguars, Nico Collins is an amazing standalone play in this slate.
I completely agree with that. I mean, Nico Collins has a 14.4 ADOT, so he's like a true downfield, deep threat guy. 25% targets per route run, which is awesome. He's seeing a ton of first reads as well, 22% first read target rate, which is elite. So, like, he's getting this volume that's supported by the play calling, and the combination of getting a high target rate plus a lot of downfield targets is leading to an expected yards per route run I have is 2.49. He's overperforming that. He's got an elite 2.86 yards per route run. He's not running as many routes as I would like. He only has 72% route participation. He was actually below Dell last week, which I thought was weird. But that's like the only real hole that you can poke in his profile. When he's out there, he's getting treated like a true number 1 wide receiver. He also, I thought, was like kind of sneaky good last year. I know Matt Harmon's written that he's, liked what he saw out of him last year. He improved a ton in ESPN's open score last year. So this is kind of looks like a breakout to me. I think he's a really strong play. And if people are going to go to Dell instead of Collins, I think that's an opportunity.
Yeah, I think this is probably the last spot out of the first 2 games that we mentioned that I could see running like a Trevor Lawrence skinny with a Nico bring back and then just sprinkling in players from the other games. After that, I'm pretty trepidatious about the game stacks or even the quarterback stacks. Starting with this next game here, we have the Ravens 8.5 point favorites, 26.25 team total against the Colts. The total is 44 here. We did get news today that Justice Hill is out. So, Daigle, I was going to plan on asking you only about Zay Flowers because you mentioned him on the podcast with Paulson. But let's double it up. Or are you interested in Gus Edwards now, since he's going to be in this, like, he's in this popular salary tier, but because of that, probably not going to get a lot of ownership? Or is it a Zay Flowers explosion game against a Colts team that allows the second most points to wide receivers so far?
The only holes I poke in Gus Edwards even reaching his salary on either site is that what is his ceiling, since the Ravens, despite the reports out of camp, clearly do not pass to their backfield. They are 31st in backfield target rate. They're just not getting targets at all. And so you have to, in this kind of slate, like, you have to either go over 100 yards or score a touchdown with triple digits. So it's just tough to take them seriously, especially because the Colts are a pass funnel. They've now allowed 4 different wide receivers to reach 16 PPR points. And 4 different wide receivers to score a touchdown as well. And so if that's the way, the Ravens are yet again going to attack, and this is one of the games under consideration for the weather, but it does seem to make better for Zay Flowers and Mark Andrews. No Odell Beckham in this game, so Nelson Aguilar will step in. I don't think I want to go there that cheap. I like some other guys around him. But either way, yes, Zay Flowers seems like one of those guys where I'm going to let the field tell me what I'm doing with him Sunday morning.
Yeah, we don't really have any Ravens popping in our projections this week. Even though they do have the big spread, it's just kind of a rough spot for the reasons you mentioned. But we do have a couple Colts popping decently in the projections. Zach Moss looks like a really good value at his salary, but he is 8.5 point underdog. Michael Pittman, 7th in the league in weighted opportunity rating. Ravens have allowed the 7th most fantasy points to wide receivers. Karain, do you have any interest in either of these players?
Yeah, and Daigle had the Zach Moss call last week.
Yes,
that was really nice. 98% snap share for Zach Moss. I mean,
I didn't think that. I didn't think that was coming. Yeah, I knew they hated D.L. Jackson. I just didn't realize that much.
They really hated him. Yeah, he had 86% of the team attempts. He ran routes at 91% clip. Like, the backfield is Zach Moss for probably this week and next week. So I think he's in play. Like, you're getting a whole backfield, that's kind of rare. So it's almost like doesn't matter to me what the overall kind of setup is when you can just capture an entire backfield like that. And then, I think Michael Pittman is set up really well. I think Gardner Minshew probably helps him just in terms of pass volume. I think Richardson actually has played pretty well so far, but Minshew's going to bring that pass volume. And Michael Pittman under a new coaching staff, one of my questions entering the season was like, is he going to run every single route? Because that was like kind of sneakily one of the things that made him really fantasy relevant, is that he just never, ever left the field. And, they had all the kind of guys coming in last year. He was in that role. And then under this new coaching staff this year, 98% route participation. So he's out there all the time still. And he has a huge lead in target share, targets per route run, first read targets, anything you want to look at. He's got a huge lead over Alec Pierce and Josh Downs, 32% target share, 37% air yard share, an elite 0.73 Whopper. Like, he has a huge share of this passing game. If the Ravens are going to push the Colts and the Colts are going to pass more than normal with Minshew, I think Pittman's pretty interesting. I actually think Minshew's kind of interesting too.
And I don't know, to that point, Karain, I don't know if the Ravens' big total here is warranted. Because we haven't seen their defense pushed yet. They still don't have Marcus Williams and Marlon Humphrey, 2 of their top 4 highest paid players on the team in this game. And they've opened the season with CJ Stroud in his debut and Joe Burrow in a Bengals offense, the only offense in the league averaging less than 4 yards per play right now. So we haven't seen anyone be worthy to push him. Like, what if Shane Steichen and Gardner Minshew are the ones to make this total go higher? Then we do have some fun little skinny stacks of Zay Flowers and Michael Pittman. You mentioned his 32% target share. Whenever Minshew came off the bench last week, Michael Pittman was targeted on 40.9% of Minshew's throws. It got even higher. So, like, it is like a sneaky little skinny blow-up spot here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the skinnies a lot in this game. Like I don't love Zach Moss as a 8.5 point underdog because he's just he's so cheap, especially on DK after that. Like people are going to see that 100% touch share and play it at 5,500. We have him in that like 18 to 20% ownership range right now. I don't know if like there's just so many good running back values that I'm kind of wouldn't be surprised if we get Sunday and that's a little bit lower than expected. But if we get Pittman at half the ownership of Zach Moss, I really like that spot. And he's actually projecting like as a better cash game play right now. We have him as a top 2 FanDuel wide receiver value, price below 7K, and he's in the FanDuel optimal right now. So even though he's like, I don't know if people just click and see him in optimals or if they just take the discount on Zach Moss, but I have a feeling that Pittman's going to be pretty low owned, even though he's like popping as a good value this week.
I could see that.
Bills at Commanders. Bills 6.5 point favorites, 25 point total, 43.5 point game total. Nothing like super pops about this game except for we got a couple like possible injuries. James Cook late injury report, Dawson Knox limited practice participant. But the thing that stands out to me is like a super obvious contrarian spot. Like Diggs could blow up in any game, obviously one of the most elite wide receivers in the league, and he's just going to carry no ownership because everything's going to Tyreek and Justin Jefferson, who are priced like 1,000 above him, but kind of within his range is Keenan Allen, who's also going to get a ton of ownership. So like we're going to get Diggs at like 7 or 8%, which is very, very interesting. So I know Cooks has been getting pulled in the red zone, but but I mean, against a really good pass rush, like maybe he's just like a elevated target guy to kind of alleviate that, maybe a PPR monster this week. What's your take, Pat, on the Bills this week?
Yeah, I like that take of like, one of the things about writing the walkthrough is kind of funny is like, I don't consume a lot of content as I'm doing it. And I don't really know like where everyone else is at. Now, something like with the Chargers and Tyreek and like Waddle potentially being out, I was like, yeah, with that Tyreek's going to be pretty popular this week. Yeah. That's not hard to, but it's, you can kind of like write up all this stuff and there's some things that really jump out as obvious. But then in DFS, you come to it and it's like, there's nothing about this game that really jumps out to me, but I agree with you. Like it's Stephon Diggs, it's the Bills, and there's no reason that they couldn't have a strong performance. And if everyone else is just going to be elsewhere, I think this is one of the spots to look at. Cook is interesting. I both am worried about the goal line stuff and maybe not as worried for this week specifically. Like I actually think like Dawson Knox potentially being out might hurt Cook a little bit because I read this as they were going to go back to more of the week 1, 2 tight end, kind of like showing the run looks type of stuff. Against the Raiders, it's like you can just beat them through the pass so easily. It's like they didn't need to kind of mess with that. They had a little bit lower, still a lot of the 2 tight end stuff, but instead of over 50%, it was in the 30%. And I was thinking they might go back to that. And that's probably good for Cook. They're going to be a little bit more running, a little bit more probably dump off passing to him to beat a pretty decent pass rush here. But I do think that Diggs could be a strong play. And I think Cook, you're betting on explosiveness, even though you're probably not getting the goal line work.
Yeah, it looks like Cook not listed on the injury report. Knox,
I think it was a personal matter.
Gotcha. And Knox full participant today. So
nice.
Looks like they should be at full strength there. Daigle, Washington side is kind of weird. Brian Robinson's been dominating touch share so far, but I mean, they could get in a negative game script this week. And if that happens, I wonder if we see things change a little bit. As far as the pass catchers go, like we just haven't seen anyone separate as far as targets, and we don't really see big 8-outs right now. Terry McLaurin got that deep touchdown last week, but no commander at or above 20% target share. Do you have any interest in Brian Robinson this week, or do you think maybe the touches merge a little bit if they get behind?
He makes my list, but he's kind of in that uncomfortable area in a worrisome game script where I just don't know. You mentioned the touch share too. Since Antonio Gibson fumbled in the second quarter of week 1, Robinson has out-touched him 35-5. Gibson just hasn't been a part of the game plan whatsoever. Yeah. And so, yes, that would be the option. We're also still waiting to see about Curtis Samuel, who's questionable. Logan Thomas out this game. So maybe targets do get a little more condensed. If so, Jahan Dotson is the one who pops as a value since he's still at least out there as a full-time player. Terry McLaurin's running around on 80% of dropbacks, which is good, but he's still the clear second receiver, maybe because he's still slowly working his way back from that preseason toe injury. But that's kind of all that's on my radar if you're trying to find some sneakier options here.
I would also say McLaurin for your battle royale type stuff. I don't know if you're going to him in DFS, but he's not. You got to scroll down to get him, and I think he is actually kind of interesting. I think he might be kind of coming back a little bit. He saw 2 more first read targets last week than in week 1, and his profile looks pretty similar in terms of like how he's earning targets when out on the field to Dotson. And again, if a guy is not healthy and he's like got the same target profile as his healthy teammate, and we thought he was better before the season, I'm like, hey, maybe let's be a week early on, oh, Terry's back. And again, probably not for DFS, but any like the prop stuff, battle royale stuff, I think he's a little interesting.
Yeah, I'm kind of just messing with Bill's standalone plays in this one. I it's tough sell with Washington this week. Should note for cash games, Bills are 2,900 on DraftKings. A 6.5 point favorite priced under 3K. That's usually a lock for cash games. I wanted to talk about these late games together just because it's kind of a funky setup. As I mentioned, we have 9 games early and then we have 3 games late, with 2 of them being expected blowouts. Chiefs favored by 12.5. Cowboys also favored by 12.5 against one team that's absolutely reeling in the Bears, and one team that playing better than expected in the Cardinals, but Cowboys have just been world beaters so far. Daigle, does either of these games stand out to you as one that we can stack with all these other early games, like really expecting to be heavy chalk?
It would still be Chiefs Bears for me. I don't know how I would play it. Patrick Mahomes, anytime he comes in like under around 5%, seems like something that should always be on our radar. You don't even need to play the wide receivers. You don't want to. It could just be him and Kelsey. But then you have to ask, how do you fit in Jefferson and or Tyreek Hill? So that becomes one problem for this slate. And then also, who do you play it back with? Maybe even like a Roschon Johnson kind of was the first player that came to mind for me. But also, there's so many running back values. I don't think you need to go there around 4,700, even though he did earn that 19.5% target share in garbage time in week 1. For the Bears, though, it is interesting because eventually something's going to pop here, whether it be like the organization or Justin Fields, but he's getting the passing volume he didn't get last year. Like, he's averaging 33 pass attempts per game. All you need to do is mix in a couple more runs, and he's back to being that top 5 quarterback he was last year. So one of these games, and if it's against the Chiefs, all bets are off. This is a 65-point total, and no one's going to survive the people who stack this game. One of these weeks, I can't guarantee you it's this one, though. Justin Fields will get the design runs back. And when that's the case, both offenses will go nuts. I just don't know if it's this one.
Yeah, we have like some late chalk. Tony Pollard, Travis Kelce on FanDuel, Zach Ertz, just because he's cheap and is getting volume. I know.
He's getting Miles Sanders, Isaiah. It's so weird.
I know you. Still funny though.
Miles Sanders, Isaiah Pacheco, and Kenneth Walker all project well, but again, like so much chalk in the early window. I mean, kind of going off of what Daigle said, like, are you, Pat, trusting Justin Fields goes back to like his, whatever he said, not thinking and playing and maybe keeping this game close and keeping it stackable. And if we do play any of the few chalk players in this late game, are there any crazy late swaps that we can get off of? I mean, it's the pickings are so thin because with only 3 games.
Yeah, I don't really see any like crazy late swap stuff. I'll keep looking, but nothing jumped out. For the Fields thing, like, I know that he's missed a bunch of throws and he's to blame for a lot of their struggles. But also like the coaching is definitely to blame. Like, call some design runs for Justin Fields. I don't know. It doesn't seem that hard. It doesn't seem like that should be something that's just you didn't think of. Like, this is the same coaching staff as last year. Like,
I know, it's the same thing they did. It's wild.
Yeah. So I don't have much hope for the Bears. I don't think this is something Justin Fields can fix himself. He needs some help, and I don't know that he's going to get it. But I do have some faith in the Chiefs, specifically just like Mahomes, Kelce. Like Mahomes and Kelce, I think are going to get it done this week. The Bears are real bad against the pass. And the thing that's interesting about the Chiefs is even though, they've struggled this year compared to what we're normally expecting them to do, they have been in game scripts that they could have been very run heavy if they wanted. Like they have not been in game scripts that have a high expected pass rate. And yet they lead the NFL with a 15% pass rate of expected. They are 15% pass rate of expected on first down, which is a sign of aggressiveness. They are a team that views their passing games the way they win. The Bears defense last year, you could do whatever you wanted against the Bears. You could run, you could pass. This year, their run defense has been okay. Their pass defense still looks horrendous. So Andy Reid is like, sweet, I'm just going to pass all over these guys. And I think it's probably flowing through Kelce. The receivers we're seeing no reason. It's really weird. Like MVS and Sky are just like eating routes. Like these dudes cannot get targets to save their life. And then Justin Watson, weirdly, is getting targeted at a decently high rate. And Kadarius Toney, who won't be in this game, is getting targeted at a very high rate. And then Rashee Rice is getting targeted at a pretty high rate, one on the field, but those guys aren't on the field. So it's like the guys who can get targeted aren't playing, and the guys who are playing can't get targeted. So I don't want to mess with any of it this week. It's just kind of like a Mahomes Kelce skinny stack with no bring back is kind of appealing to me. What else do I do after that? I don't know yet.
Yeah, I mean, it's always tough on DraftKings with Mahomes and Kelce because they take up so much salary. Like you're going to get moderate ownership on them because of that. But on FanDuel, it seems to work a little bit better. And the projections kind of bear that out. Mahomes and Kelce are both the top values on FanDuel. Mahomes actually in the FanDuel optimal, as well as Pacheco. Tony Pollard, the top overall value on both sides. He is in our DK optimal. Other players projecting well in the late slate. Amari Cooper, Zach Ertz, as I mentioned, and Kenneth Walker, all kind of like in the cash game mix. I mean, after those games, it is pretty damn thin. Are there any other games that we care about? I mean, obviously we'll get one-offs everywhere, but from a stacking perspective, guys?
I had nothing.
From the afternoon, no. From the first slate of games, the only two other spots I would mention, like we have to talk about Deshaun Watson, who this is the litmus test game, against the Titans defense that has allowed back-to-back 300-yard passers, yet again, a pass funnel this year. And Watson, we just haven't had a chance to see it yet. Week 1, that rain game where both he and Joe Burrow couldn't even hold on to the ball. And then week 2, home opener for Pittsburgh. They lose Nick Chubb halfway through. They have to rejigger their entire offense for the second half. It just wasn't good news. We at least have excuses. There are no excuses this one. This is the spot right here. So we'll see what happens. But either way, Amari Cooper and Elijah Moore are terrific values, and they've created their own little target tree with Watson. Cooper's getting 25% of the targets. Moore's getting 23% of the targets. Moore's even gotten 3 carries on the season as well. They're finding ways to shove him the ball. So you can go to either of those players. And then just how the defenses work out. If the Panthers had any juice whatsoever, and Bryce Young has been so bad that maybe Dalton even being slightly
I think he's an upgrade average right now.
Yeah. He definitely is. Dude, both Seattle and the Panthers are just they're ravaged with injuries. Even Tariq Woolen, Seattle's already. Last year, they only got beat in the middle. We talked about that last week. This year, they're also getting beat on the boundary. Tariq Woolen injured last week. Panthers lost J.C. Horn on IR. Shaq Thompson now out for the year as well. They are just blown up. And so it seems like both of those games are great spots to get pieces of. I just don't know how I would play Carolina, Seattle. It'd probably take some faith in Jonathan Mingo at 3,400, who did run a route on 98% of dropbacks. He's out there. He hasn't been good. He's been terrible.
Yeah, he's been very bad.
But he's an athlete, and he's out there with an accurate quarterback now. So it just takes a little bit of faith in those games, but the disaster's there to make it work.
Yeah, when salaries came out early in the week and the way everybody had been playing Tennessee, I thought, maybe Deshaun Watson will be in my player pool. And then we got the totals, and I saw that the game total was 39.5 on that game with all these other like spots. It's just hard to look at that. I mean, I think at least one of us has said this every week so far, but if Kenneth Walker comes in at like 11 or 12%, this is a smash spot for him. So, I mean, he got the touchdowns last week. The yards per carry is abysmal, but
and
he can have
Charbonnet got more raw touches, but Kenneth Walker's rate of the team's backfield carries increased. It increased to 77% in week 2. So he's still getting the touches that like we care about most, especially if we think like this game, that's how they run it through. With DK Metcalf, I would think truly questionable. DMPs Wednesday and Thursday, limited on Friday. It just seems like that's kind of where they would go here.
One low salary, probably slow pace game is the Lions and the Falcons. But one crazy note from that, DraftKings just didn't touch Josh Reynolds' salary. So he's priced as the wide receiver 14 on FanDuel, but the wide receiver 44 on DraftKings. So he's just like a crazy, weird wide receiver value. Like, I don't know if there's much upside, but he's automatically going to be in our cash game pool just because he's so mispriced on DraftKings. It's super weird. I don't know what happened there.
We talk about a slate filled with rain. That's my other game. I talked about Broncos and Dolphins. Falcons Lions is one where I could see it being a boon for fantasy points if everything clicks. The Lions.
Reynolds, Kyle Pitts minis. Is that what you're telling me?
Oh, I was going Laporte to Kyle Pitts double tight end. What are you talking about?
So the Lions, James Houston is their best pass rusher according to Pro Football Focus grades. So they're missing James Houston this game, and then also Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, their starting safety who had a 50-yard pick 6 in week 1, he's also out. So they are already ravaged. They have 1 sack on the year too. So we think the Falcons can attack them. The question is, are they able to push Desmond Ridder?
Are they able to call passing plays?
That too. And that might not matter, but are they able to push Desmond Ridder as the Packers did? Because Ridder then became the QB 12, 10 carries, 22 fantasy points. Like that's how we get there with the 5K Desmond Ridder or Jared Goff throwing on the other side. Like we just need both these offenses to push one another. But indoors in a rain-based slate, we might be able to get there. Not to mention because with no David Montgomery, and this could happen with the Chiefs, by the way, if Isaiah Pacheco's ruled out since he was limited on Friday. What we saw with the Giants, Saquon Barkley, as we expected, they became more pass heavy. It's not a 1-for-1 offense, and that could happen with David Montgomery. Maybe they're just become more pass heavy, and now we're running the offense through Jahmyr Gibbs through the air and Jared Goff, as opposed to actually leaning on Craig Reynolds for those 18.5 carries that Montgomery averaged. If so, that's how both these offenses get there indoors and like fill the stat sheet. And so I'm kind of looking at it in that direction. Y'all mentioned Kyle Pitts. This is the lowest he's ever been on DraftKings. And I'm not even trying to sell you playing him. I'm just telling you, this is the cheapest he's ever been. The sickest thing I'll ever say, and I'm going to say it one time, and then we're never going to talk about it again.
Clip it.
Kind of like Mac Hollins in this game.
Oh, God.
Because where the Lions have been attacked is the boundary. And both Drake London and Mac Hollins, they've combined for just 18 slot routes. That's all Kyle Pitts. Those two guys only play on the boundary. And you ask, okay, why not Drake London? One, because Drake London's not 3,500. More importantly, Mac Hollins has a higher target share. He has 20% of the team's targets, and his ADOT is 4 yards higher than Drake London's. Like, to me, that's what I look at whenever I'm trying to attack this defense. So I'll say that.
I hate that makes sense.
Ugly as it's going to get for me.
If that hits, I'm going to be so annoyed because we're just going to have to like live with that hitting, and there's no way I'm playing it.
Diego, are you playing Jahmyr Gibbs?
I may play 5 players from that game because they're underpriced.
Wow.
They are Kyle Pitts, Mac Hollins. If you want to say Drake London, Jahmyr Gibbs, Josh Reynolds, Jared Goff, Desmond Ridder. I just named guys that are like 5K and under. It doesn't make sense. I don't understand why. Because it is one that could go over 50 points. So that's one environment I'm looking at strongly.
All right. That's intriguing.
Caught us off guard there.
I'm sorry.
Going from that end of the spectrum to the chalkiest plays. The chalkiest.
Not
plays
that one. That's not the chalkiest plays. I can tell you.
No, it's not. Weirdly,
let's play a quick little game of player fade. Passing game ownership. Just tell me. You could go either way with the Daigle. One of the teams you want to play or the teams you want to fade. The highest passing game ownership right now. We have Chargers and Vikings by a mile, and then Dolphins and Chiefs a little behind them.
I want to play the Dolphins.
All right, I like that. Pat?
I want to play the Dolphins too. I also want to play the Vikings. And I'm down to fade the Chargers.
Yeah, I think I'm playing a lot of Dolphins this week. I think I'm playing a lot of Chiefs on FanDuel. Chalk players, player fade. The chalkiest players right now, we have Mike Williams, Justin Jefferson, Bills defense, Tony Pollard, Keenan Allen, Tyreek Hill, and Travis Etienne. Pat, anyone that you have a strong lean on there?
I think the Chargers wide receivers are the ones that I'm probably going to be fading the most. It's easy for me to see how they fail as big chalk. I think Josh Kelly could be part of that reason. Also, like, I'm not sure these guys have massive ceilings, so
I agree.
Like, if they're going to eat huge ownership because of the game environment, maybe they have good but not great games, and I can find more unique stuff.
Diego?
I would fade. I guess it is the Chargers, just given context of the slate, because the Chiefs are interesting. I can already envision Isaiah Pacheco being ruled out. I drop from Jefferson to Addison, and then I get up to Mahomes, Tyreek, and Kelsey somehow. I can already envision that lineup happening.
All right. I want to be way over on Tyreek. I'm going to be under on ETN, especially if he's super chalky. I like the Jaguars passing game this week, especially for minis with those Texans receivers, with Nico Collins especially. Before we get into our favorite plays of the week at each position, want to remind everybody about Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy sports made easy. Go to prizepicks.com/DFSMVP and use the code DFSMVP for a first deposit match up to $100 for week 3. Hopefully you guys get these in while you still have a chance. We have some really good spots this week. Gus Edwards with Justice Hill out. We like him for more than 48.5 rushing yards. Tyreek Hill with Jalen Waddle possibly out and even limited. We like him for more than 6.5 receptions this week. And Devontae Parker versus a very tough Jets secondary. We like him for less than 36.5 receiving yards. That $25 entry will 5x your money with that 3-player pick 'em. Don't forget to go to prizepicks.com/DFSMVP. Use the code DFSMVP for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks is daily fantasy sports made easy. All right, let's get into it. Our favorite plays of the week. You guys can take any angle you want. Cash game, GPP, however you want to play it, and I will give a quick cash game note on the end. Pat, who's your favorite quarterback this week?
Kirk Cousins. Nothing super shocking here, but especially TJ, after you're saying like there's a chance Addison gets cut out, and like maybe just from a he's not that cheap and he's not running all the routes. Maybe he is more unique than I was worried he would be. I wanted him to be, but then I was worried he wouldn't be. So if I can go with Cousins and Addison and maybe not play Jefferson, I think that's kind of a fun way to kick things off. Hawkinson is definitely in consideration for me as a double as well.
Yeah. The one thing I would say about that is like if Cousin gets there, like he gets there with doubles, right? Because he's not getting there through rushing. So like I think you could play Addison with Jefferson and Cousins. Like I think you could play him with Jefferson, and actually it might even like
I like that.
I think I might even like it more. Yeah.
That's good note.
Daigle, who's your favorite quarterback this week?
I like to always look and see what y'all are doing and then just give everyone another example. And so I mentioned him earlier. If you want to spin down at quarterback, Russell Wilson is popping in our ceiling projections as well. Again, it's very hard to figure out where you would stack him, which will turn everyone off from that offense naturally. But if we think like the overall total gets there, it's probably because the Vikings or the Broncos helped them out. So Russell Wilson, I think, is a value in this slate.
If you play Wilson, who are you pairing him with?
Adam Troutman.
Interesting. Okay.
Again, I mean, given where I can save money at compared to the other guys in this slate, I think that one makes, all relative, but it makes sense.
I will say, like, if the two players that we're projecting the best are Jefferson and Tyreek, and everybody's playing one or the other, if we could figure out a way to get both of them in our lineup, like maybe that's what we try to figure out how to do. I don't know if it's possible. I haven't tried to build around that yet, but like maybe we try to do that.
So without playing Desmond Ritter and Matt Collins to get both of them in our lineup is what you're saying.
Okay. Yeah. But that's our Matt Collins.
Presented one way.
That's if you're playing Matt Collins, you better be playing Jefferson and Tyreek together.
Yeah, you better be. That's a rule.
Absolutely. That should be your lock rule in the solver.
You could tell I've already played with it, so I have the answer for you.
Yeah. My quarterback is Patrick Mahomes, 9,200 FanDuel, 8,300 on DraftKings. And we just don't see Mahomes is weird because like, unlike these Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, like he's not going to win you the week with rushing alone. So like, it's really hard to make him the best value. One thing everybody's going to be looking at this Chargers game and looking at that total, and it's projecting so much higher. If we look at the team totals, the Chiefs are the one lapping the field. They're the one projected for over 30 points with no other team projected for 28 or more points. So they are really the team that should be lapping the field standalone. We have Mahomes projected for 20% over the field in terms of fantasy points versus the other quarterbacks. His value score is 50% higher than any other quarterback. The Bears are last in EPA per pass play allowed on defense. Mahomes is just never a cash game play for me because of the things I stated, but I mean, he might be the cash game quarterback this week, even though it might be hard to get to. Daigle, running back. We haven't even talked about this game.
We haven't talked about this game or this guy. And I don't know if anyone's scrolled down on either DraftKings or FanDuel, but we're in a salary discussion because what can you get if you spend $4,300 in particular on DraftKings on Kendre Miller? Because even in a slate full of value, $4,300, that reminds me of the one time I used to play MLB DFS and FanDuel accidentally left.
What are we doing?
FanDuel accidentally left Kiki Hernandez at $100. They mispriced him overnight. And the winning Millie lineup had him, although he finished with zero because of what salary allowed you to do. Kendre Miller and a $4,300 running back, that just doesn't exist. It doesn't happen anymore. And here he is, limited all last week, didn't make it to Monday night, full practice all week ahead of week 3, and no Jamal Williams. They didn't even want to use Tony Jones. Tony Jones got out carried by Taysom Hill 3-1 until Jamal Williams was injured. And then they had no other running back available. And then they used Tony Jones after that. But Kendre Miller's a 96 percentile athlete who averaged 6.7 yards per carry and now has no one in his way. And I think a favorable game script since we expect Jordan Love to finally stop pulling the wool over everyone's eyes soon. Like an 11.5% touchdown rate is not continuing. So I kind of like a little Kendre Miller Saints correlation defense here.
I love how the podcast has just evolved from us breaking down every game to now we're just like do everything to jam Tyreek and Justin Jefferson. That's just what we've reached.
The Matt Collins one, I was a little bit in shock, but I kind of love this case. Jordan,
I like this one
great.
A lot too.
Kendre Miller is a very interesting prospect. Seemed to have a pretty strong summer before he dealt with the hamstring injury. Full practice all week. Love that. Jordan Love is last in the NFL in completion percentage over expected. This Saints defense, I think the strength is going to be the coverage side, not getting to Love. But that's like if you have an inaccurate quarterback who's mobile, a good coverage defense is not what you want. So I think I just love that. The Kendre Miller, the Saints defense, I'm in.
Who else do you love?
I love Kenneth Walker. I was on the Swolecast this week, and I kept trying to talk about Ramondre Stevenson, and David Kitchen kept interrupting me to tell me I should be talking about Kenneth Walker, which I found very obnoxious, but I hadn't written up the Seahawks yet, and then I realized after the fact that he was right all along. I should have been talking about Kenneth Walker. This is a really awesome spot for him, even with Andy Dalton out there probably being a little bit of an improvement, just given how poor Bryce Young has been this year. And this looks like a potential eruption spot for Walker. The thing about him, you mentioned the rushing has not been good with Kenneth Walker, but he is a home run hitter, and we've got 2 games where he hasn't hit any home runs, and so he looks bad. But it's 2 games. It's 2 games. We know this guy from last year, from his prospect profile. He's a very talented rusher. And now he's set up in a script where the Seahawks are going to be delighted to be able to run the ball against an Andy Dalton offense on the other side. And the other thing about Walker is that he does have 105 rating and elusive rating right now, which is excellent. Like, he is breaking tackles. He just hasn't hit those long runs yet. I think that he could definitely do that. Game volume or play volume here, maybe not ideal, but I've got a breakaway runner. I think he can be one of the guys that you're really feeling like you had to have this week.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, it sounds like, I think we've said it every week, but Kenneth Walker just feels like absolute smash this week. As I mentioned earlier when talking about the Cowboys, Tony Pollard is 4-for-4's top overall value across both sites. Again, this week's going to come down to, like, if you want to spin up at quarterback and receiver or running back and wide receiver. But Tony Pollard is the top value this week. Going to wide receiver, Pat, if we've been listening since the beginning, we know you love him. Who's your favorite wide receiver this week?
Yeah, I don't need to do the spiel again. It's Jordan Addison for me.
Yeah, beautiful. I love the Addison play. Like I said, double them up. Daigle, who's your favorite play this week?
Another option we don't need to spend too much time on is Josh Reynolds is still too cheap. 17.8 PPR points per game, the team's only end zone target, and that was with Amon-Ra St. Brown at full health. What if this toe injury that forced him to just have one catch for 5 yards in the second half lingers? What is Josh Reynolds' ceiling? So Reynolds all the way.
Yeah, and we didn't talk about this game too much. We mentioned it at the end, but from a cash game perspective, Amari Cooper looks like the best wide receiver play on the slate. 6,200 FanDuel, 5,700 DraftKings against that Titans pass funnel. They've allowed the least fantasy points to running backs, the third most to wide receivers. After Justin Jefferson and Tyreek Hill, Amari Cooper is the best wide receiver value on 4-for-4 on both sites. He's in both optimals. Amari Cooper is the best wide receiver cash game play on the slate. Let's assume that Jalen Waddle is limited or out, Daigle, or maybe it doesn't matter. Who's your favorite tight end?
I don't think it matters because Durham Smythe has led the Dolphins in routes run in both games. Not over the course of the season. Individually, weeks 1 and 2, Durham Smythe ran more routes than Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. That's how he's being used. Now, there have been instances.
It's a good thing we like Mike McDaniel, because that would be used against him if we didn't.
There have been instances like last week, for example, there was a play where they both ran deep, he and River Craycraft, and Smythe was wide open, and Tua instead went to River Craycraft. Like, there is that, but don't worry about that. Smythe is out there in a very friendly environment. We've talked about throughout the show. 2,900 on DraftKings. Just play him. What
would you be? What percentage would you be upset if you saw him? If you get to Sunday, you see his ownership percentage. What number would you regret playing him at?
12%.
I think he's going to be above 12. If Waddle's out, I think he'll be over 12.
Fair. If Waddle plays, I still think he's fine.
Yes, I agree with that. Crane, we haven't talked about this play much. Tell us about your favorite tight end.
Yeah, Mark Andrews. I mean, I'm looking at that Vikings game, and I've got 6,500 Hawkinson. I've got 6,000 Mark Andrews. I mean, I think we feel pretty strongly about which one of these guys is actually better. The Ravens are in a good spot, as we talked about. They should attack through the air based on the matchup. And then when you look at Mark Andrews' profile, just one game this year, but the thing that really jumps out is that he has a 5.6 yards per target, which is quite poor. But yards per target is the thing I want to bet against being sticky. We see a lot. We see that bounce around all over the place. He's getting targeted at a really high rate, 24% targets per route run. In his first game back, 24% target share. He had 85% route participation, which is elite. It's a new offense. So I like seeing that Mark Andrews is back, right? We also have how healthy is he? Looks healthy. The yards per target isn't there. Cool. That might keep everyone not thinking about him all that much. So he's someone where he's like pretty cheap, for what we think we can get from this level of talent and, in a good spot. He's someone I'm trying to figure. There's like a number of guys who are kind of sort of one-off type moves or kind of mini stacked things that I'm trying to figure out how to fit all of it. But like Andrews Pittman is pretty fun this week.
On DraftKings, expensive tight ends always kind of weird, especially projecting ownership, just because people don't like to do it. On FanDuel, we could see Kelsey come in, like if things break right, as high as 3 times as high owned as Andrews. Like Kelsey could be in that 18 to 20% range. Hawkinson could be in like that 14 to 15% range. Andrews might be down at that 6 or 7% range on FanDuel. So I really, especially on FanDuel, where the expensive tight end works better. I like that a lot. Again, going back to my boring cash game play, Zach Ertz, 5,100 FanDuel, 3,500 DraftKings. Most targets among tight ends, 10th in target share among all tight ends. Actually saw him get a little bit of an A dot going last week, which is good. Has a little bit of meat on the bone in terms of like expected fantasy points. So in cash, we're probably just playing Ertz, even though it's not too exciting, but that's how cash games go. DSTs.
I talked about mine already a little bit, but just know Jordan Love is throwing a touchdown for every 8.5 pass attempts. And last I checked, that is not sustainable.
All right. Pat, who's your favorite? And that is the Saints, everybody. Pat, who's your favorite? No, you're
Kendre Miller.
I got you. Yep. Kendre Miller. Oh, mini stack. There we go. Karain, this is interesting defense.
Yeah, I kind of like the Commanders because they're inexpensive, and I don't see how anyone is going to be, flocking to play a defense against Josh Allen. But the Bills, they struggled against the Jets, and they get the Raiders. The Raiders are just such an easy matchup. And it's just, pass attempts against. Josh Allen makes some mistakes, and, we get there with the super cheap D.
Bills 2,900 on DraftKings. As I mentioned before, anytime you have a sub 3K defense favored by basically a touchdown, they're pretty much going to be a cash game lock. I will leave everybody with this. I went to the solver while we were talking. I plugged in some rules on GPPs. 2 players sub 10%, total ownership under 130%, locked in Kendre Miller, locked in Matt Collins, locked in Tyreek Hill, locked in Justin Jefferson. It tells us to play Jerome Ford in that lineup. So have fun with that, guys. Good luck to everybody this week. We appreciate you guys. As always, if you like this podcast and want to give back to us, you can rate and review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to. Please give us a 5-star review. Helps out a ton. If you are watching on YouTube, please like the page. Please subscribe to the page. That also helps out. Go to the description for discounts to the DFS sub and access to our Discord. Also links to upgrade to the solver, links to legendary upside. That promo code is YouTube. The word YouTube saves you 25% off of a 4for4 DFS plan at 4for4.com/plans. One more time, everything going on at Legendary Upside, Pat.
Yeah, one thing I'd say is check out the Legendary Upside podcast feed, because I've got a free preview of the narration that I do for the article, because it's a long article. Yes. And so I do narrate it as well, the entire thing for the premium subscribers at legendaryupside.com. But I had a free preview, and I was having fun with the free preview this week. It's almost an hour. So you can get quite a bit of content for free if you go to Legendary Upside podcast, wherever you get your podcasts.
Yeah, it is really the best comprehensive breakdown available. As you can tell, we're using it here every week. Make sure you're following all of us on X/Twitter. Pat is at Pat Karain, Legendary Upside at Legendary Upside. Daigle is at not J Daigle. 4for4 is at 4for4 Football. I'm at TJ Hernandez. We will talk to you guys Sunday morning in the 4for4 Discord.